right, Ben. How's it going? We are live with Benjamin Knight Fuchs
Good
here
to see
on
you, Mr. Liam.
Good to see you, Ben. How
You
are
got
you?
this weird screen. What a weird screen. Oh, there you go. All right. Well, did you have a good week?
Very productive week. Doing a lot of work rebuilding old wounds. I've got my 90 essential nutrients. Been hammering away every day, taking care of my gut health, like we talk about.
Good for you. We had a nice discussion yesterday or last Sunday about gut health, and YouTube didn't like it. YouTube took
Really?
offense. Yes, and they pulled us off, and I had to write a rebuttal. They thought I was blaming. I can't even say it. I'm not even going to say it. They thought I was blaming a certain health challenge on a certain type of injection. We'll say that.
Does it start with the letter V?
Oh no! Don't be pushing the envelope on the algorithm or on AI. So they thought that I was blaming this health condition on this type of injection. I was not doing anything of the kind. I simply said that this type of injection can disturb the microbiome, the bacteria in the intestine, and that can lead to certain health challenges, which we talked about last week. And this microbiome connection to health is really important. When I was in pharmacy school, we talked about the microbiome, but it wasn't really well known. In fact, there weren't really a lot of scientific articles talking about the microbiome. Today, there's thousands. So in the space of really 30 years or so, we've really begun to understand that there's a very important impact on the relationship between the microbiome, the bacteria in the body, and good health. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here today. But we're going to focus today, I thought we would focus on what's called the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, which are two components of the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic is a fancy way of saying automatic. So there's a nervous system that controls our movements, and you decide when to move your muscles. That's the voluntary nervous system. You have control over that. And then there's the automatic nervous system, which is technically called the autonomic nervous system. That controls heart rate and pupil dilation and digestive functioning and respiration, things that aren't in your control. Like, for example, you can't stop your heartbeat. You can't stop your digestive system volitionally, right? You can't stop your liver from producing certain molecules volitionally. That's all automatic, or as they say in biology, autonomic. So the autonomic nervous system is divided into two sections, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a very, very important distinction. Put the first slide up there.
Certainly.
This is a very, very, very important distinction when it comes to health. The parasympathetic nervous system is known as your rest and digest nervous system. That's because it controls relaxation and digestion, which is a clue right there. You want to digest your food when you're relaxed. And that's all regulated by the parasympathetic division of the automatic nervous system or autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system increases salivation. It has a calming effect on heart rate. It lowers the blood pressure. It activates the digestive system, stimulates the gallbladder, and it also plays a role in sexuality. It stimulates sexual functioning. That's what foreplay is about, by the way. Foreplay is about relaxing the body before you have sexual activity. You activate the parasympathetic nervous system. On the other hand, the sympathetic nervous system is the stress nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is very, very important for getting us out of a jam. But hyperexcitation of the sympathetic nervous system, sympathoexcitation is what they call it, is behind all chronic degenerative dis-ease. And their clue is right there in the word, dis-ease. The parasympathetic nervous system regulates ease. The sympathetic nervous system controls out of ease. Now, we say dis-ease when we're sick, but really it's when we're stressed, when we're out of ease. If you make that a little bit bigger here, Liam, that slide. If you can you make that bigger? There you go. The sympathetic nervous system will make your pupils wide. It'll dilate your pupils. It slows down salivary secretions. That's why you'll get dry mouth. When you're scared, your mouth will be dry. Or when you're nervous, your mouth will be dry. The sympathetic nervous system is designed to get you out of a jam. And from an evolutionary perspective, that jam is running away from a lion or a tiger. So it will open up the lungs and it will raise your heart rate. So you get more blood. It raises your blood pressure. And most importantly, if you understand the relationship between the triangle of disease and health, the sympathetic nervous system inhibits digestive function. That means it inhibits digestive juices. It inhibits pancreatic juices. It inhibits gallbladder functioning. And it has a slowing down effect on digestive functioning. And this is one of the major reasons why we deal with digestive distress, that is the stress response or hyperexcitation of the sympathetic nervous system. Constipation, by the way, is regulated by this sympathetic response. You're not supposed to be digesting your food when you're running from a tiger, or for that matter, you're not supposed to be having a bowel movement when you're running from a tiger. Most importantly, one of the most important things the sympathetic nervous system does is it suppresses the immune system. It has an anti-inflammatory effect, and it suppresses immunity. Now, you may think that's a good thing, but in the long run, you can't heal without inflammation. So in the long run, activation of the sympathetic nervous system is going to have a negative effect on the immune system and a negative effect on healing. The sympathetic nervous system relaxes the bladder. The sympathetic nervous system has a suppressant effect on sexual behavior, but it is related to, has a stimulating effect on orgasm, which is kind of interesting. So when you're all freaked out, it's very difficult to have sexual activity, as many men know. When you're freaked out and you're scared, it's difficult to have an erection. This is all because of the sympathetic nervous system. And as I said earlier, that's what foreplay is about. It's about relaxing, activating the parasympathetic nervous system. We'll talk about a few strategies for doing that. So we talked about the triangle of disease. Well, actually go to the next slide here. We're beginning to understand how sympathoexcitation, activation of the stress response, it's just a big word to say you're under stress, your body's under stress, you have the stress response kicking in, is now thought to be linked to the aging process. So this is a study that came out last year from Experimental Physiology. The importance of sympathetic activity and chronic regulation of blood pressure and the potential risks associated. Blood pressure, by the way, is a major manifestation of sympathoexcitation, high blood pressure. And this is why relaxing the body is so important. If you're one of the millions of Americans, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of Americans who are dealing with hypertension, which they call essential hypertension in probably 80% of the cases. Essential hypertension is a type of high blood pressure or hypertension that has no known causes. Well, here you can see that the main cause of hypertension, whether you call it essential or anything else, is hyperactivity of the sympathetic nervous system or sympathoexcitation. Quote, the importance of sympathetic activity and chronic regulation of blood pressure and the potential risks associated with excess sympathoexcitation. Elevated sympathetic nerve activity is observed in hypertension, as well as, it turns out, heart failure and obesity. The quote further goes on to say, sympathoexcitation is considered to be causative in hypertension, and that means also in cardiovascular health issues, because when you have high blood pressure, your heart has to work harder. High blood pressure is associated with heart disease. So there you go. Sympathoexcitation is relationship to cardiovascular health. Next slide. Mechanisms underpinning sympathoexcitation, that is the stress response in hypoxia. Hypoxia is low blood oxygen. The number one threat to the body is suffocation. And under conditions of holding your breath, which many of us do chronically, we hold our breath when we're traumatized or we have a stress response. And if you think right now, Liam, if you think about something you don't like, think about your credit card bill or something at work or your family or whatever, you'll notice you contract a little bit. You'll hold your breath just for a split second as you these negative stressors. Can you feel that? Well, when that happens chronically, eventually you end up with this condition called hypoxia, low levels of oxygen in the blood, and that is a major trigger of the sympathetic nervous system, which is why, and I'll talk about this towards the end here, breathing slowly and deeply is a great strategy for activating this parasympathetic response, this relaxation response. Next slide. Sympathetic nervous system is a target for aging, which we just talked about, and obesity-related cardiovascular diseases. It turns out that obesity itself, which is an epidemic, as well as cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 cause of death in this country and around the world, has a relationship to the sympathetic nervous system. The next slide, you'll see the same kind of sympathetic nervous system activities associated with, as we talked about, high blood pressure and obesity, but also with metabolic syndrome. Talked about metabolic syndrome a few weeks ago. Metabolic syndrome is everything syndrome. It's liver disease and dementia and autoimmunity and cardiovascular disease and obesity. And it's all related to blood sugar. And guess what? The sympathetic nervous system plays a role in what's called dysglycemia, or messed up blood sugar, and metabolic syndrome. As you can see, the next slide, it talks about the sympathetic nervous system being related to cardiovascular disease risks in obesity. Quote, the sympathetic nervous system plays a key role in both cardiovascular and metabolic regulation. That is all the chemistry in the body. Disturbances in sympathetic nervous system regulation are likely to impact both cardiovascular and metabolic health. And with excess fat, they say adiposity, which means fat, in particular, when visceral fat accumulation is present. Visceral fat, that's the problem. Fat around your belly that we get as we get older and our blood sugar control becomes dysfunctional. Visceral fat accumulation is present. When visceral fat accumulation is present, sympathetic activation commonly occurs. Next slide. Does the sympathetic nervous system contribute to pathophysiology of metabolic syndrome? That's all the things that can happen in the body when your blood sugar is messed up. They used to call it Syndrome X. And pretty much all of our chronic health challenges are related to metabolic syndrome. Quote, obesity and hypertension are closely related and associated to the increase in aggravation of stress, of the stress response, as sympathetic disturbances are often associated with obesity and hypertension. This present article summarizes the role of the sympathetic nervous system and metabolic syndrome. Next slide. Diabetes in the sympathetic nervous system. Diabetes is an epidemic. Data suggests that activation of the sympathetic nervous system represents one of the main factors for the sustenance and progression of this pathological condition. And then we have the relationship between the stress response and accelerated aging, exposure to chronic, next slide, exposure to chronic stressors, which presumably is going to be mediated or activated by this, or result in activation of the sympathetic nervous system, is associated with accelerated biological aging. This impact could be because of the chronic overactivation of the body's physiologic stress system. Next slide. Central nervous system control of gastrointestinal motility. That's what we talked about earlier. The sympathetic nervous system exerts, check this out, a predominantly inhibitory effect. It inhibits, it suppresses GI function. The sympathetic nervous system exerts an inhibitory effect upon GI pathways, and it has an inhibitory effect on muscle and tone of the gastrointestinal system. It also, as I said earlier, is going to end up causing constipation and sluggishness of the bowels because of this reduced muscular tone. And then I think this next slide is really interesting because I want to talk a little bit about some of the solutions, some nutritional solutions, as well as some lifestyle solutions that you can use if you're interested in turning off the stress response and activating, let me find my pen here, and activating the parasympathetic rest and digest response. Let me tell you something now. The key to graceful aging, the key to reducing the symptoms and the impact of long-term chronic degenerative diseases affecting us from head to toe, the entire body. The key to longevity is to spend as much time in your parasympathetic mode, parasympathetic way of functioning as possible. The parasympathetic nervous system is your safety nervous system. I find this very interesting. The sympathetic nervous system is your danger nervous system. Your parasympathetic nervous system is your safety nervous system. You know, if you ask psychologists, they'll tell you there's two main ways that we perceive the world. We perceive the world either with love or with fear, right? They call it love and fear are the two basic emotions. Well, this kind of idea of these two basic emotions of love and fear are manifested by the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is your fear nervous system, and your parasympathetic nervous system is your love nervous system. And this kind of makes sense when you think about parasympathetic activity as being associated with safety. You can't really activate the love response unless you feel safe. In the Bible, it tells us we have to be saved, or at least religious people say, I don't know if it's in the Bible, but religious people say you have to be saved. I say you got to be safe. It's really about feeling safe. All of our problems in life come from not feeling safe. You know, inflammation is a classic manifestation of a defensive response. That's what inflammation is. It's part of the fear response. And we know, of course, that inflammation is linked to all chronic degenerative diseases. So staying parasympathetic is job number one for longevity, for prevention of chronic degenerative disease or reduction of chronic degenerative disease, and for activation of all the good stuff, including sleep and sex and creativity and muscle growth and growth and repair and anti-aging and blood sugar control and resistance to disease. All of it is regulated by safety, by the safety response. So learning how to activate the safety response is absolutely critical if you want to age gracefully and if you want to reduce the impact of chronic degenerative diseases, or if you're young and you don't want to have any chronic degenerative diseases. And there's lots of ways to do it. So this slide here talks about, this next slide, Liam, talks about the relationship between probiotics and the good bacteria in the intestine and the sympathetic nervous system or the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is all via the vagus nerve, which I think we talked about a couple weeks ago. The vagus nerve is the nerve that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So essentially, vagal activity or vagal tone or vagal stimulation is associated with safety. Probiotics in the vagus nerve. This is an article that came out from, this is an article that was published here. I'm not sure where I got this article from, actually. But it talks about the vagus nerve playing a critical role in influencing the parasympathetic nervous system. And then it goes on to say, where does it go on to say here? This talks about using probiotics, good bacteria in the microbiome, and its relationship to vagal stimulation or parasympathetic activity. Quote, the gut microbiota, that's the microbiome, has significant influence over the activity of the vagus nerve through neuroendocrine, neural hormone, that means neural hormone, and metabolic mechanisms. Administration of probiotics resulted in anti-anxiety benefits and improvement of vagal nerve integrity. So there you go. Probiotics, good digestion and healthy bacteria in the microbiome play an important role in vagal stimulation as well as parasympathetic activation. Again, showing you the relationship between the digestive system, specifically the intestine and the microbiome, and activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest nervous system, where all the good stuff is. So how do you activate the parasympathetic nervous system through lifestyle? Lots of ways to do it. One of my favorite ways is breathing. I said earlier how suffocation is a surefire way to activate the stress response. Liam, if you hold your breath right now, you'll be able to hold your breath for, if you're like most people, for 10 or 15 seconds, 20 seconds. If you're really good, maybe 30 seconds. But after 20 seconds or so, you're going to notice that you don't feel so good. You're going to notice that you're like shaking a little bit. In fact, people who get panic attacks will notice that they get a panic attack if they hold their breath too long, and they'll notice before they get a panic attack that they're usually not breathing. So this idea of hypoxia, suffocation, low levels of oxygen, holding your breath are linked to activity of the stress response, which tells you the exact opposite is a great way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Slow, deep breathing, oxygenation. In fact, even just sighing, and by the way, the exhale is where you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. The inhale is where you activate the stress response. It's like if you're surprised, say you're walk into your house, they're throwing a surprise party for you, right? You go, oh, like that, right? You hold your breath.
Sure.
Right? And then you find out it's all a big joke. It's just a party. You go, ah. And that's where the relaxation response is. And you can actually activate that relaxation response just by sighing, just by going like this. Ah. That happens to be very relaxing. You can feel the relaxation by doing that, but that relaxation is neurally mediated or controlled via the parasympathetic nervous system. So you always want to exhale. Let me just say this real quick. You always want to exhale more than you inhale when you're breathing. You want to exhale to relax. Inhale will activate the sympathetic nervous system. So you always want to exhale a little bit longer than the inhale. And I'll just throw this in. When people are trying to have a bowel movement, they're really constipated. They're actually doing the wrong thing. They're holding their breath by pushing. That's called the Valsalva maneuver, that pushing. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. What you want to do is relax. Oh, you don't want to go, You want to go, and open everything up. I thought that's important because constipation's, it sounds gross maybe, and it's kind of weird to talk about it, but it's really serious, especially for anybody out there who's constipated. They know that ain't no joke. And it's also, it's not good for your health either because of the accumulation of toxicity. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I love that concept of sympathetic danger and parasympathetic safety.
Yes.
And love. Do you think that there is a relationship between, in church, there's a lot of singing, right?
Yes. Singing is a great way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. You know what? Another great way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Let me say this real quick. Insomnia, which is an epidemic, is a classic manifestation of an activated fear response or stress response or sympathetic response. So all of these strategies that we're talking about here, singing, sighing, well, not singing maybe, but sighing, breathing. We'll talk about muscle relaxation here in a moment. These are all great strategies to employ if you can't fall asleep, laying in bed. And one of my favorite ways to activate, and this is where church comes in and singing, which you mentioned earlier. One of my favorite ways to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is with gratitude.
Yes.
When you have gratitude, you activate the safety response. Just listing the things you're grateful for will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is why before we eat, we're supposed to say grace. Saying grace before you eat activates the parasympathetic nervous system, so your digestive juices will flow. The worst thing you could do for eating, or while you eat, is eat when you're under stress, eat when you're in an argument, eat when you're watching the news, eat when you're driving. All the things. These are all the ways we eat. This just goes to show you all the bad things that we do from a lifestyle perspective that have an impact on our disease state, and all the easy things we could do to restore ourselves back to health. So feeling grateful is a wonderful strategy. And if you can't fall asleep at night, this is what I do sometimes. I'll run down a list of all the things in my life I'm grateful for.
Wow. Instead of counting sheep, count the gratitude.
It's like counting sheep, count your blessings, right? Right? Count your blessings instead of sheep. And so when you count your blessings, your body goes into this safety mode. And you'll notice when you have insomnia, you're usually not thinking about the good stuff, right? You're usually thinking about your bills or your problems, the things that are wrong in your life.
It's the first time I heard anybody say that. So it makes so much sense.
It's logical. So activating the parasympathetic nervous system via feeling grateful, feeling spiritual, feeling religious, feeling love. These all sound maybe a little cheesy, a little corny, but they're really tried and true biochemical strategies for getting healthy. And I think, in my opinion, this is what we should be focusing on instead of being medicalized, which that doesn't really help anyway, just changes symptoms, or being surgically manipulated. Why we should be practicing these lifestyle strategies: singing, sighing, saying grace, moving your body. Here's another one: focusing on a part of your body, focusing on your hand, or focusing on your foot, or focusing on your butt sitting on the chair will activate your parasympathetic nervous system. You'll actually feel the relaxation response by placing your attention on a part of your body or on a sound of your body, your heartbeat, or the sound of your breath. In fact, even paying attention to ambient sounds, the air conditioner or the fan or a hum from your refrigerator or your dishwasher will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Amazing. So these are all things that you could do from the comfort of your own living room that will lower your blood pressure, strengthen your immune system, and improve your longevity and your digestion, and help you sleep and reduce your obesity and help you process sugar, and all these other wonderful things that are under the aegis of the parasympathetic nervous system, or the autonomic nervous system in general. Touching yourself, just touching, or being touched by others will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Petting a dog or a cat will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Taking care of someone who's more vulnerable than you will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. The number one fear, or one of the, I think it's the number one fear actually, is public speaking. Have you heard this?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Right.
Sure.
And so what do they tell you? What do they tell you if you're scared when you're public, which is a sympathetic thing? Your sympathetic nervous system is freaked out. You've got dry mouth. Your heart is beating really fast. Your blood pressure is going up. So what do they tell you when you're nervous when you're doing when you're public speaking?
I've heard them say, look at the people them in their underwear. That's what.
Perfect. That's what I was going to say, right? So what is that about seeing people in their underwear? So there's some people, you don't want to see some people in their underwear, right? That's not a pretty thing necessarily to see people in their underwear. What is that about? Well, when you look at people and you see them in their underwear, see them naked, what you're doing is you're taking the attention away from yourself and you're putting it on them. And by putting your attention on other people, especially if you're helping them, especially if they're more vulnerable than you will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is activated by self-consciousness when you're putting the attention on yourself. But when you put your attention on others, on how you can help others, how you can make a difference in the world, even just giving a dollar to a homeless person, you're going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. You're going to lower your blood pressure. You're going to support your immune system. You're going to age more gracefully. You're going to reduce the symptoms of chronic degenerative disease, all the good stuff, which is really cool, right? All of these things, grace and singing and massage or touching yourself or petting a dog or cat or taking care of a baby or nurturing someone or being with someone more vulnerable than you, those are really good things for people to do anyway, right? Absolutely. If everybody does that, we're going to have a healthier culture. But the benefits come to you too. You get the benefits of better aging, of reduced likelihood of chronic degenerative disease, better cardiovascular functioning, etc., which is pretty cool. Meditation, meditation's becoming a thing now, and for good reason. There's lots of ways to meditate. One of these days, I'll do it. I've been meditating since the 1980s. I've had a meditation practice. I meditate every day, and I wouldn't want to go a day without it. Meditation is absolutely critical, but it's very misunderstood, and there's various forms of meditation. It doesn't have to be spiritual meditation. If you do it right, meditation is simply becoming aware of your own functioning, not aware of yourself, like when you're self-conscious, but aware of how your mind works, or aware of a body function, aware of your blood pressure. For most people meditate, the first thing they're told is become aware of your breath. Just watch your breath. Just watching your body or watching anything will tell the body to stand down. This is why people watch cartoons, or they'll binge watch Netflix, or they'll watch movies. It's because when you're watching something and you're paying attention, you're mindful. Mindfulness is becoming a thing, and for good reason. You activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Interesting.
Grounding can do it. Walking barefoot on the earth can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Warm water can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Taking a warm bath, as most women know, or many women know, when they're depressed or they're not feeling good or they're anxious, they'll go in the bathtub. For anybody who is on a high blood pressure medicine, an antihypertensive, a beta blocker, a calcium channel blocker, the next time you take a bath, or here's a strategy: if you don't take baths, take your blood pressure, and then you sit in a warm bath for 10 minutes, right? Did I talk about that?
No, you didn't. But I just got a watch that has a blood pressure feature to it.
Take a warm bath. Notice what the warm bath does to your blood pressure. In fact, sometimes when people are on antihypertensives and they're taking a bath, when they stand up out of the bathtub or out of a hot tub, they'll get dizzy and woozy, and that's a manifestation of the extreme vasodilation that's occurring, the blood vessels opening and the blood pressure dropping with the combination of the warm water and your blood pressure medicine. Which is why if you're on a antihypertensive, you got to be careful about sitting in a hot tub, because it can cause a big drop in your blood pressure, and it can lead to serious health problems, serious neural problems, brain problems. There's something called forest bathing that's used in Japan. They call it Shinrin-yoku. I think that's the word. I don't know Japanese that well, but I think they call it Shinrin-yoku, and this is known as forest bathing. What does forest bathing do? Forest bathing, when you're out in nature, they call it forest bathing, but basically means going out in nature, that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That has a relaxing effect via something called negative ions. I don't want to digress too much on these negative ions, because they're super fascinating and they're deserving of a podcast or a video cast on its own. But negative ions are basically electrons that give the body energy. When the body has abundant energy, it can stand down. It can relax. And this is why nutrition is so important for the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system functioning. When the body has enough resources, it will feel relaxed. Well, that's what nature does. Nature floods the body with negative ions, which are essentially electrical energy. And this electrical energy gives the body enough resources so that it can drive biochemistry. And so exposing yourself to negative ions is inherently and intuitively relaxing. That's why we go to the beach. When you go to the beach, the ocean is a big sink of negative ions. The sand is or the earth is actually, when you're walking barefoot on the earth, you get negative ions coming in through the sand or from the earth. This is why people like to walk barefoot in the grass, because they're getting negative ions literally through the soles of their feet. And it's providing electrical energy for the body through your feet. That's called grounding. So being in nature, going to the beach, forest bathing, hanging out where there's a presence of negative ions. One of the great places where there's negative ions, or one of the great times when there's negative ions, is after it rains. You know, ever notice how great it smells after it rains, how clean everything feels? Mm-hmm. Negative ions. You can actually even buy a negative ion generator, and sometimes they'll use those in hospitals. And negative ions, again, are just electrical energy. And when the body has enough electrical energy, it feels like it doesn't have to work as hard. It's relaxing for the body. It activates the relaxation response. And then being with other people is a great strategy. Being in relationships, socializing is a great strategy. Have you heard of this thing called the loneliness epidemic?
Yes.
There's a loneliness epidemic that we have in this country, where people are chronically lonely. They're not connected. This is one of the reasons, by the way, if I could give a plug for Youngevity, why I love Youngevity so much. Youngevity is a family. And it's not just a family, it's a family of like-minded people, a real family, right? You're not always like-minded with your true family or your birth family, but the Youngevity family is a family of like-minded people. And when you're hanging out with your peers, with your colleagues, with your family, your true family, your parasympathetic nervous system stands down. You know, when we had that viral thing that happened a couple of years ago, and which was obviously an immune system problem, what were we doing? The exact opposite of what we should have been doing. We were masking so we couldn't breathe, activates the sympathetic nervous system, suppresses the immune system. We were pounded with fear messaging. Everywhere you look, there was fear messaging, activates the sympathetic nervous system, shuts down the immune system. We were social distancing or locking ourselves in our house. So we were separated from the group, from our friends, from our peers, from our relationships, activates the sympathetic nervous system, suppresses the immune system. These were all the exact opposite things that we should have been doing.
And within the triangle of disease, right? That's really affecting the adrenal complex. And so you've got cortisol raging through your system. And
that's right. Exactly. With the triangle of disease, that sets the whole thing off. Cortisol, by the way, not only works upwards on the triangle to suppress thyroid functioning, but it works backwards to inhibit digestive functioning, and also has a negative impact on blood sugar processing. So this triangle of disease goes both ways. It goes from cortisol to the thyroid and back around, as we talked about, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago, and it goes back the other way. So yes, calming the body down is not only critical for helping reduce the symptoms, reduce the likelihood, improve the prognosis of chronic degenerative disease, to have better sleep, to be more creative, to have better sex, better digestion, to grow and repair more effectively, to anti-age or reverse the aging process. By the way, the sympathetic nervous system, chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system, will have negative effects on the skin. Eventually, it will prevent the body from rebuilding collagen. Collagen in the skin is constantly being broken down and being built up, but under conditions of sympathetic nervous system activation, you're not going to build collagen as effectively. Under conditions of sympathetic nervous system, the inflammatory response the immune response will be suppressed, and you'll be more susceptible to bacterial infections in the skin. And that includes, by the way, acne. Under conditions of sympathetic nervous system, you'll produce more oil and you'll have bigger pores. And a lot of people are, I don't know if you know this, but pore size is a real big thing for folks. And there's not a lot of things you can do to reduce pore size topically, but by reducing the flow of skin oils, by calming down, among other things, there's other strategies you can use. You can improve pore size and reduce the appearance of oily skin or skin oiliness, which is a sign of the stress response. Something else I was going to say, which I forgot what that is. Long story short, calm the F down. Relax, people.
Baby.
Lighten up. You know why angels fly? Because they take things lightly. So lighten up. Chill out. Relax. Take a load off. Get a massage. Just meditate, breathe.
Pet your favorite puppy dog.
Pet your favorite puppy dog. Take care of a baby. Sit in a hot tub. How cool is it that all of these wonderful things that we all love to do, and that's what I was going to say, is not only will you improve your health, but it's pleasurable to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Relax the body to improve your health and to improve joie de vivre, joy for life, to maximize pleasure, the pleasure of being in a human body. Activate the parasympathetic nervous system whenever you have an option. In the Bible, it says you're either with me or against me, right? Jesus says you're either with me or against me. It doesn't go both ways. In the body, I say you're either parasympathetic, net parasympathetic, or net sympathetic. You can't be both. You want to be net parasympathetic.
Net love, net safety.
You always do need, by the way, the sympathetic nervous system is not a bad thing. You need the sympathetic nervous system to get you out of dangerous situations. In fact, you need the sympathetic nervous system to get you out of bed in the morning. You get a surge of cortisol early in the morning, and that's designed by nature to get your butt out of bed and just start the day. So it's not like the sympathetic nervous system is all bad. It's this over excitation of the sympathetic nervous system that creates the problems.
Wow. Amazing, Ben. Amazing. Learned so much on this podcast.
Let me just say this real quick. There's a wonderful nutritional supplement called theanine, which has a calming effect on the body. Magnesium has a calming effect on the body. GABA, G-A-B-A, gamma aminobutyric acid, which is partially derived from or related to chemical secretions from probiotics or from good bacteria. GABA has a calming effect on the body. The amino acid glycine will have a calming effect. Inositol has a calming effect. Tryptophan, or some people will take a 5-HTP tryptophan, or form of tryptophan. Both of these will have a calming effect on the body. And there's also adaptogenic herbs. Ashwagandha, perhaps you've heard of that, has a calming effect, a parasympathetic activating effect, or tends to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Valerian root, from which the name Valium is actually derived from, has a calming effect. Damiana is a nice calming herb. Chamomile is a calming nerve. So there's lots of ways that you can calm the body through lifestyle, through spirituality and mental strategies, and also through nutrition and nutritional supplementation.
Outstanding. What a great message for a Sunday evening.
Thank you. Good to see you, Liam.
Good to see you, Ben. All right, everybody. Leave your questions and comments in the platform. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next. All right, everybody. Take care. See you next Sunday. Bye-bye.